My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Have you ever wished you could snap out of it when you feel overcome by stress, worry, fear, frustration, or other troublesome feelings? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, mindfulness expert Julie Potiker, has developed a new approach to mindfulness designed to help you do just that. A former attorney, Julie is a certified mindful self-compassion teacher and founder of the Balanced Mind Meditation Center in La Jolla, California. She began her in-depth study of mindfulness after graduating from the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program at the University of California, San Diego. She's the author of Life Falls Apart, But You Don't Have to, Mindful Methods for Staying Calm in the Midst of Chaos. And her work has been featured by Oprah Magazine, Costco Connection, AARP, AP News, NBC, CBS, Fox, The CW, and many, many more. Her website is mindfulmethodsforlife.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and latest book, Snap, From Chaos to Calm. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Julie Potiker. Welcome, Julie.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Victor.
And thank you for joining us. Julie, please tell us about your early path prior to embracing mindfulness practice.
I was a little bit of a train wreck, if you want to know the honest truth. Do you want me to delve into the train wreckage?
Yes, if you'd like to, if you feel comfortable.
I think sometimes people come to this development path because they're individually suffering, and that was certainly the case for me. I had the wrong words coming out of my mouth, or the words were being garbled, and I was concerned, so I sought a neurologist to make sure I didn't have a brain issue, a brain tumor, something going on that was serious. And after completely scanning and vetting my brain and doing an interview, he explained to me that what was happening was stress. I was just filled with too much cortisol. I didn't even know the word cortisol at the time. And my 3 teenage kids, who all are slightly neurodivergent with ADHD, which means schooling isn't easy. And my parents were aging, and I was the only daughter of our 3 daughters of my family of origin here with my parents in San Diego, and it was just too much. So he recommended mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I had not yet heard of, even though it was created in 1979 by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And I took that class and was so shocked, really stunned, that there was this entire lane that I didn't know anything about. I was an attorney by education and practice, certainly not anything in personal growth. So the mindfulness-based stress reduction class opened me up to knowing that there was all these other courses, and I love being a student. It's one of my core values. So I just kept taking different classes and different trainings, and eventually mindful self-compassion was invented, and I took it. And then a few years later, a teacher training was created, and I took it, and then I started teaching it because it healed me.
And that was 2010 that you began studying mindful self-compassion, and the practice began in 2014. Please share that with us and how it changed your life.
Well, the mindful self-compassion curriculum is similar to mindfulness-based stress reduction. However, it adds self-kindness explicitly, not implicitly. So the 3 components are mindfulness. You have to know you're suffering, of course, to do something about it. Then self-kindness, really treating yourself like you would treat a dear friend. And that's a big statement, right? Because we're not very nice to ourselves. And then common humanity, which is completely helpful, because if you're feeling an emotion that's uncomfortable and you recognize in your bones and in your heart that 1 billion or 2 other people on the planet Earth are having that same feeling at that same moment, it broadens your awareness and your perspective, and it helps to stave off feelings of despair, or can help to stave off feelings of despair. And it certainly did that for me.
And what is mindful self-compassion like? What's the practice like?
Well, really, it's treating yourself with love and care and concern. So it's an 8-week curriculum, and then I've sliced it and diced it every which way to add other things to it. But basically, you learn how to meditate. You do a lot of loving exercises to yourself and to the planet. And I incorporate explicitly a gratitude practice and experience-dependent neuroplasticity, which is taking in a positive mood or creating one, noticing one if you happen to have it, or manufacturing one if you feel bad, and then enriching it and absorbing it so that you push that happy mood into an actual trait in your brain. I think of them as happy bridges. So you're going from state to trait, which is what you want to do. So instead of saying, that's a beautiful sunset, what's for dinner? That's a beautiful sunset. Wow, look at those colors. You're enriching it. You're absorbing it. You're taking it in. Boom. What wires together, fires together. You have created a happy bridge in your brain.
I like that. What wires together, fires together. That's wonderful.
Thank you. That's not me, but that is one of my teachers. And Rick Hansen is really, I think, the penultimate teacher of this, his taking in the good. It's way easier to explain than experience-dependent neuroplasticity training, which I took the professional class of so that I can teach it. But it's all about not letting beneficial moods go to waste. Have them, plant those seeds and watch them grow and tend to them with love and pull out those weeds. We have some control over this that we don't realize.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Rick Hansen about 2 years ago, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, he's a wonderful man. Wonderful.
He's the best.
Why do you think it's so difficult for many people to love themselves and give themselves the same compassion and love that they run and give to others so freely, but not within themselves?
Oh, Victor. So I'm not a therapist, but in the mindful self-compassion curriculum, there's a unit on the inner critic, and it's pulled from internal family systems, which is Dr. Schwartz's entire life's work. And it enables you to contemplate and consider, who is the voice that is your inner critic? Where did it come from? And it's an early child care person. So oftentimes it's the mother, but it's not always the mother. And then you really do these writing exercises and meditations that enable you to contemplate what they were really trying to do. Because usually, unless there's severe abuse and neglect, usually the inner critical voice or the caregiver was trying to be helpful in some way, and you internalize that voice. And as you grow up, that voice is not helpful and it's not skillful. So during a series of exercises, you come to realize that, and you come to terms with it, and you kind of write them a thank you note and a retirement letter. You put them out to pasture because you have a compassionate voice that you then access that is helpful and is motivating and is loving and is caring.
I can share a personal story that's a little different from the caregiver aspect. My dad was 20 years older than my mother, and when I was 8 years old, he became ill. He had a series of illnesses that left him bedridden. And at that point, I became part of his caretaking team with my mother. And for the first time, I felt that he truly loved me because I was giving him care and he was loving me back. And that wired in my young mind, if you care for others, you will be loved. He passed when I was 15, and I carried this wiring with me until my late 30s, early 40s. When I came to the realization that I can run around and help everybody else, but I also have to take care of myself. And I think that's a hard lesson for most of us to learn.
Yeah, it certainly is. You can burn out if you're doing that, if you don't fill your own cup and you're just giving. I mean, being of service is one of my core values also. So I am continually spreading myself out, usually for no fee, in order to help people. But you do have to refill your own soul, or you won't be effective anymore. And actually, there's a mindful self-compassion adaptation for caregivers that I am trained to teach that helps caregivers take breaks, even momentary breaks, while on the job. Just using the hand sanitizer and giving that a moment of mindfulness with your hands rubbing lovingly into each other, or imagining leaving footsteps from one patient room to the next so that you're dropping your awareness to the soles of your feet to break the cycle of worrying and ruminating that we do when we're, because we're alive and we're primates and that's what our brains do. So I'm glad that you learned that you had to do you, or you would be a puddle.
Absolutely. I think on a soul level, you and I are brother and sister.
Oh, that's a big compliment. Thank you.
I sense that. You're talking about what you were doing in your path and so on, and I think that we have a lot in common and probably, part of that same soul family. So thank you. Thank you. So there's a lot of strong science, as you had mentioned before, behind how mindfulness affects the brain. You talked about the rewiring. How does that work?
So this is my favorite practice, and it has personally changed me. And you're not going to think this is weird, but maybe your listeners will. It has personally changed me from a person that was glass half empty and suffering from clinical depression on and off, and even suicidal ideation at times, to a happy, well-adjusted, integrated human being. And that is literally the work of Rick Hansen. It is taking in good when you notice it. So you have to notice it. That's the mindfulness piece, right? You have to develop a practice where you're paying attention to what you're doing when you're doing it, and then see how it feels. And if it feels good, let it land, enrich it, and absorb it. Dan Siegel says it a little differently than Rick Hansen. Dan says, and I've taken so many classes from him online, he says, where attention goes, information flows, and neural networks grow. And both of those guys are basically talking about the happy bridge thing, which is my term that I coined because that's how I think about it in my head. And then if you read Shauna Shapiro's book, which is so chock full of science, Good Morning, I Love You, you can really see how when you're laying down all these positive neural networks in your brain, naturally the negative ones get pruned out. And we have a negativity bias because we're primates. So I remember once being at a workshop and Kelly McGonigal was speaking about the pruning that goes on and the default mode network, so that when you're just sort of la, 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 not engaged in a task, your mind can be a bad neighborhood, and how pruning out these negative bias things can actually make your default mode network a better neighborhood. You can have a happier brain. And I remember emailing Rick Hansen, who was my teacher, and saying, oh my God, Kelly McGonigal just said this. And he said, can you get me the science? And I emailed her and I emailed him. And I mean, this was just so exciting. So it's really a burgeoning area of science. And people that are spiritual might think like we knew that already. But for people like me who has a lawyer brain, who's always looking for the evidence, and who isn't really what I would necessarily call spiritual, this stuff is fantastic because it makes me want to do it. And then the proof is in the pudding because I'm a happier, more integrated, well-adjusted human.
And you were literally doing neural networking.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yes, Victor.
Absolutely. Now, getting back to your path, after you had the mindful self-compassion training and teaching, it began to rain, R-A-I-N. But this is not the kind of rain that falls from the clouds. Share with us the meaning of the acronym RAIN and how it inspired you.
Okay, so RAIN is Tara Brach, whom I imagine your listeners all know who she is. She's phenomenal. She popularized the acronym RAIN, but she didn't create it. It was created in the 1980s by a mindfulness teacher named Wendy McDonald. And RAIN is recognize, allow, investigate, not identify. And I folded it into the mindful self-compassion curriculum because I thought it was better than the self-compassion break, which was what was in there. But they couldn't use RAIN because they didn't create RAIN. So I started teaching RAIN anyway, because why not? It's really helpful. And then eventually the N, the not identify, became nourish. And I was at a one-day long seminar with Tara Brach. And when she got to the N and she said nourish, I was like, ding, 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 ding. She changed it. Was it because of the mindful self-compassion movement, which was spreading the globe? Thank goodness. So I went up to her at the break and asked her, and she said, yeah, it nourishes great. So I was teaching RAIN, but I was teaching RAIN and I was using soothing touch, which RAIN doesn't do. And it dawned on me during the pandemic that RAIN needed an update, and that's how I created SNAP.
Now, you taught RAIN and other techniques in your first book, Life Falls Apart, but You Don't Have to. Mindful Methods for Staying Calm in the Midst of Chaos. What inspired that book, and what did you share with your readers?
That book is really a mindful self-compassion memoir. So it's stories prescriptive. So if you read or listen to that book, it's out on Audible now, you will get the entire mindful self-compassion curriculum in story form. And then at the end of each story, what tools from the toolbox of mindful self-compassion were used to help the individuals in that story. And many of the stories are from my life, and some of them are from students' lives or family members' lives. And that book I wrote because I just wanted to get the message out wider than having 15 people sitting in front of me in a classroom.
Absolutely. You've been studying, practicing, and teaching mindfulness extensively for years. How did this lead you to write your latest book, SNAP, From Chaos to Calm?
SNAP is really to get SNAP out into the world. Victor, if 1 million people who teach this type of work would start teaching SNAP, it would help untold millions of people. And that is really what I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning people having a feeling that they're uncomfortable with, snapping their fingers, doing soothing touch for the S so that they can begin to down-regulate the cortisol and adrenaline, because it'll happen. They'll put their hands on their body where they find it soothing, and they'll get oxytocin and endorphins as if they're mothering themselves. Their body will do that for them. And then the N is name the emotion, further calming down that primitive amygdala that we all have while we wait for the front of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, to come online so that we can make a more skillful response. So they'll name it. They'll say fear, right? And then the A, they'll outstretch their arms originally while they're remembering what the acronym is. And it'll be, what do I need to hear right now? And they'll tell it to themselves. And then what do I need to do right now to shift? And that is the toolbox. So the toolbox is all in the first book. And of course, it's mentioned in the second book so that people know how do they build a toolbox? They write a joy list. And then there'll be things that won't be on there because they just won't have thought about it, like meditating if they're not a meditator, or specific breath work, or using a rosary or a mala or a here and now stone or whatever, like things to break the discursive loop. And then the P is praise. And this is cool. And this is another thing Rain does not have. The praise can be thanking yourself and your teachers and the universe, which is how I think about it. But if you have a religious faith that is deep, that gives you so much solace, you could be doing that praise right there. And I know because Mindful Methods for Life, my business page, has a lot of people on there. And last weekend there was a little post. It was just a meme. It was a quote, and it just somehow touched a nerve. And there were people on there quoting scripture, and there were people on there saying Jesus and give it over and it's going to heal you and it's the only way. And I was monitoring a little bit before it got completely blown out of my mind. And I was saying, well, thank goodness Jesus isn't the only way, because we all have the opportunity to heal.
And so everyone is, instead of saying, oh, snap, they're saying, oh, snap.
Exactly. Soothing touch, name the emotion, act, and praise. And I have these cool hand motions when I teach it live. And the gestures have multiple hooks with different categories of movement connected with the words to reach the enactment effect in our brains to help us remember it. So when people leave the workshop, they actually can teach it to their loved ones and their colleagues.
That's wonderful. My guest is Julie Potiker. Her book, Snap, From Chaos to Calm. Julie, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
They can get my book where books are sold. If the bookstore doesn't have it in stock, they can certainly order it, or they can use Amazon. The Audible isn't out yet, but it's me narrating. I'm really excited about that because you have to push for that when you're an author. And my website is pretty much a resource library. So it's not only my books, but it's every book I've ever found helpful, and my teachers' newsletters and different apps and my blogs and a free podcast that's hundreds of me leading extemporaneous guided meditations, each with a poem.
And we'll be back with more of Julie and Snap after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Julie Potiker. Her book is called Snap, From Chaos to Calm. Julie, it seems like acronyms are your mantras. How do acronyms help us to remember these practices?
It's really funny because I used to think that acronyms didn't work for me. And Here I am writing a book with an acronym on the front, but they actually do work because you know the one from mindfulness-based stress reduction that's stop, stop, observe, take 3 breaths, proceed. You know, that one has lasted forever. And Rick Hansen has heal, which is have it, enrich it, absorb it, link it. So anyway, they work. That's why they just work. They help you. And snap, I just imagine, I don't like this feeling. I just imagine snapping my fingers. Last night, I had such an incredible scare. My husband's out of town. And so I was taking the dogs out and I have this big flashlight, but it plugs in and I didn't realize that the charge was low. And so the light was going on and off and on and off and on and off. And I've got these 2 big dogs and I take them to the backyard to do their business. And the light is starting to go out and go on. And I'm getting a little bit nervous because it's dark out. And as I'm coming back to the house, I hear a pack of coyotes. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if you've ever heard a pack of coyotes like maybe hunting or eating something or fighting, but it's terrifying sounding. And I can't find Madeline, one of the dogs. She's not with Eloise. And so I'm like freaking out. My heart went insane. And I ran into the house. I got another flashlight. I ran back out. I'm like, Madeline, Madeline, Madeline. Finally, I get her and I bring her into the house and I close the door. And I'm like, I got to snap this. I need to calm down. So I snapped my fingers, which I don't need to do anymore, the arm motions, because I have this practice internalized. I put my hands on my heart. I was like, Julie, calm down. Nothing bad happened. I named it as fear, right? But then I said to myself, you're safe. That's the act. What do I need to say? What do I need to hear? You're safe. Nothing bad happened. You can slow your roll right now. Everything's okay. And then I knew I needed something to help me further slow down. So I turned the television on to like a stupid TV show to just really shift so that I wouldn't dwell on, that was scary. Oh, that was scary. Oh, that was scary. I just wanted to drop it and shift my awareness to something else. And it worked. And then I thanked my practice.
There you go. So you snapped away the fear that was generated by the amygdala.
Yeah, because you know what? Your blood pressure and your heart rate go up. I mean, we're embodied. My vagus nerve was like, it was like, alert, 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 so from my head all the way down to my guts. And I had to calm it down, and calm it down I did. And it didn't take long. I mean, maybe it took 5 minutes, but that's not horrible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's wonderful because prior to working on these practices and embodying these practices and training other people in these practices, you might have really freaked out.
I might have really freaked out, or I might have said, you know what, I need a drink, or I need a pill, or, and I don't need that because I've got this toolbox. I've got the power.
You touched upon some of these. What other differences are there between SNAP and other mindfulness techniques?
Well, this is like going to sound, I feel like I have a lot of humility. So this is going to sound a little bit obnoxious, but I think SNAP's better than anything out there. I really do. It's fantastic because it helps your nervous system calm down right away before your thinking mind comes online. You can think to put your hands on your body where you find it soothing. And when I teach soothing touch, people are always so surprised because if a baby's crying out and an adult picks it up, the baby gets that soothing cascade of feel-good hormones, and so does the adult. But science didn't explain this until relatively recently, that we can parent ourselves. We don't need somebody to hug us and comfort us. We can comfort ourselves. How powerful is that?
And you say that you can share the SNAP strategies for coping with anger, anxiety, grief, sadness, depression, shame and guilt, even political strife and disasters. Talk a little bit more about self-compassion and what that plays in this.
I divided the book into those chapter headings because I needed to figure out how to organize it. But SNAP works for whatever feeling that you have that you're feeling discomfort. So, when something horrible happens, I use SNAP and I might use a different tool. So if it's, let's say, a death, for instance, or a mass shooting, or, these things that happen every single day that are so tragic, the tool that I use will be different to help myself feel better. And I use a practice that a lot of Buddhist teachers say is advanced, but I've never thought of it as advanced, and it's always worked for me, even when I was a beginner, and that's called Tonglen. And in English, it's the receiving sending meditation, and that's breathing in really the horror that whoever is a victim is feeling, and then using your power in your body to transmute that into healing. And it looks sort of like you're breathing in gunk that's sticky or smoky or dark or thick or nasty, and you're breathing out like a cool, fresh, clear peace and healing. Does that make sense, or does that sound weird?
No, not at all.
And what I think really, and I haven't found this in any literature, but one of the reasons I think it helps is because you're actually doing something. You're actually using your body, which gives you a sense of control and agency. You can't undo what happened. And it's so tragic for the families that it happened to. And it's so tragic for our society as a whole, if we're talking about the gun problem that we have in the United States. But we can do that.
It's interesting how you talk about self-compassion and also the question of presence, self-presence. You said agency. The fact that we recognize that these horrible things are happening and we have compassion and love and understanding for those who are experiencing these horrible things, but we also can separate ourselves.
Right, because it's really not your story. I learned that recently from David Kessler. Do you know who he is?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I just graduated a few months ago from his grief educator certification training. Not because I want to run grief groups, but because in my weekly meditation group that I've been running since the lockdown, so it's been 3 years now, people get sick and die.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to hold the space and to say something hopefully helpful or at least not harmful. And that's why I took that training. And in that training, there were a couple real ahas. And one of them was, well, that's not your story. You can have compassion and empathy, but that's not your suffering.
And a lot of us have a tendency of embracing that suffering as our own.
Right, right. I mean, I knew people actually, this gets into politics a little, and I won't say where I stand, but I knew people that at certain elections, they couldn't get out of bed. They were rendered incapacitated by their suffering. And that's just not helpful for anybody. You still have to be able to function so that you can be the change. That's cliche, but it's true.
You had mentioned the inner critic earlier in the interview, and we're all too familiar with that nagging internal voice. In your first book, you recommended calling yourself sweetie or some other term of endearment. You have developed a more colorful term for that inner critic. What is it, and how can we silence it?
So am I allowed to say a swear word on your show?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I call my inner critic my inner bitch, and I just have her shut up and sit down. And I call myself sweetheart. And every time I call myself sweetheart, it makes me smile. And just making me smile or laugh changes my physiology. And that's the brain science part of it. when I read, you're going to think this is weird because why am I promoting somebody else's work? But I do that with Rick Hansen all the time. When I read Shauna Shapiro's book, when it came out a couple of years ago, which is Good Morning, I Love You. And it was a practice that she did looking at herself in the mirror and saying that, which is a self-compassion practice. Hello. When I read her book, I said to myself inside my own mind, Julie, you don't ever need to write another book again. This is the book that is necessary and it's already out there. But then I invented Snap. So Snap needed to be written.
And everything that we contribute to this conversation, to all of the conversations, the important conversations, are enhancements and add-ons that those people who can't adapt one technique will adapt another technique, and it's all part of the practice.
You know what I think about it is that we shouldn't live from a place of scarcity, right? So there's enough for everybody. And that's why I think it's so important to always mention my teachers, because I didn't come up with this stuff.
Absolutely. I always honor my teachers. And in the honoring, you're also passing on the learning and the education.
Exactly.
You write about having compassion for ourselves as well as the world and letting our hearts radiate love outward, what you call the bust your bra state of being. How can we get in touch with that compassion?
I think by practicing loving kindness meditation, you'll get the feeling. So if your listeners are interested, they can look it up under Metta, M-E-T-A, Metta meditation, or they can look up loving kindness meditation. And on my podcast, Balanced Mind with Julie Potiker, every single meditation is some variation of a compassion meditation where we are sending out wishes for peace or love or hope or healing or health or harmony to other individuals. So the classic, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease, may we be safe, may we be happy, blah, 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 may you know what I mean? And you do that in your mind as a visualization to different recipients. At some point, I read a study that said that loving kindness meditation makes people more altruistic as opposed to other types of meditation. So if you're going to meditate, which you should because of the wellness benefits of meditation, which are huge, why not do a meditation that is also going to make you a better human? Like, why not raise the bar for all of humanity? So that's why every meditation I teach, which it might start out as shifting your awareness, or it might start out as a breath meditation, but it's always going to end with wishing others well.
You also share a story about not being into praying and then realizing that your mindfulness meditation was a form of prayer. Please tell us what happened.
Yeah, so this is interesting because if you would have asked me 10 years ago whether I prayed, I would have said, no, I don't believe in it. But one day I realized when I was very deep into a loving kindness meditation that I was praying my heart out. I mean, that is prayer. That is prayer. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live your life with ease. If that isn't a prayer, what is? And so then I got comfortable with praying. I'm not comfortable with reading a liturgy that I don't resonate with the words because I'm kind of literal. But when I am in my own heart and mind and soul wishing wellness, it's a prayer, and it really gives me a feeling of expansion in my chest, which that's where the bust your bra came from, because I felt like I'm really expanding physically. And
as interfaith practice teaches us, in every faith, in every religion, there's an iteration of the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If we took those two elements and every human being practiced that, what a world this would be.
Oh, it would be the best. I still have a marble that says that. That's like from my elementary school that I've been carrying with me through my life.
There you go. Acronyms and marbles, a way to have a spiritual path. My guest is Julie Potiker. Her book is called Snap, From Chaos to Calm. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Julie Potiker. Her book is called Snap, From Chaos to Calm. Julie, you were talking a little bit earlier about Rick Hansen and compassion. Please share what you shared with me.
He has just created the Global Compassion Coalition, and I'm so excited. He's pulled together people from all over the world that teach compassion-based interventions, researchers, teachers, doctors, and their hope is to create a movement that will then be able to take on huge world issues and make the world a better place.
Wonderful. How can listeners find out more about that?
There's a website, Global Compassion Coalition. If they Google it, they can find it.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a quick question that just popped into my mind. You were an attorney, a lawyer.
Yes.
And you followed this path. Do you ever teach other lawyers and attorneys, and how do they respond?
Yes, I do. And it's really fun because their body language at the beginning is sort of like, really? They're skeptical, like I was skeptical. And by the end, they're open and they get it and they're wow. And they're usually the ones that are furiously taking notes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for doing that for our law community. Thank you. People often say they're too busy to meditate. How do you hope to change that by teaching SNAP?
Well, if you have a minute to slow down, that can be a meditation. You can do mindfulness and daily life activities where you're paying attention to what you're doing when you're doing it. And that can add up in brain health terms to time on the cushion. So I really believe everybody should meditate, and I really believe that they should meditate for at least 12 minutes. But if they just want to start by, when they're outside, putting their phone down and actually feeling the sun on their face and listening to the birds, and when they take a walk, feeling their feet touching the pavement and their arms moving in space and seeing if there's any sense, that can all be a meditation. Yoga can be a meditation. Qigong, Tai Chi. You don't need to just sit still like Zen style on a cushion. All these things where you're giving your brain a break, dropping into what you're doing when you're doing it, can be a meditation.
For me, washing dishes is a form of meditation.
I love that. And I do that when I'm folding laundry. And my morning coffee, not the whole cup, but the first few sips. I'm like feeling the warmth on my hands. I'm looking at the color. I'm smelling the aroma. I'm taking a few sips. I mean, it's a gorgeous practice.
And for those who find their lives exhausting, what are some of the ways we may recharge and beat the burnout?
We need an hour for that, Victor. But
give us a few.
the short answer is to choose activities that fill you back up. So it depends how overburdened you are, but to choose little breaks in your day, even if it's just you're at work and it's going into the bathroom and closing the door and just closing your eyes and taking 3 conscious breaths, longer on the exhale, or, having a here and now stone on your desk so that you can pick it up and just consider it and feel it in your hand. I just picked one up on my desk and it's like, this feels a little bit chilly and it's got ridges and what is it? And all of that takes you out of the feelings that you're too tired and you can't possibly go on.
And how about mindfully listening to music that you love?
That's one of my very favorites. Letting music move you is a fantastic meditation. And I'm always looking for more bangs for my buck. So when I want to refuel and I'm near a swimming pool, which happens because I live in San Diego, I'll put on an aqua jogger belt and I'll put on my earbuds and I'll listen to a playlist that a group of us mindful self-compassion practitioners put together. So there's hours of songs and we all threw different songs on this playlist. And I can even think about who put that song on and make me happy. And then the songs make me happy. And then I'm in the sunshine, which makes me happy and gives me vitamin D. And then I'm moving my body, which makes me happy and gives me endorphins. And, it's like, how many bangs for your buck can you do in 1 hour? And that's what I go for wellness.
Any Moody Blues on that playlist?
Absolutely.
Oh, I love the Moody Blues. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful.
I have a great Moody Blues story, but I'll tell it to you after the interview.
Okay, thank you. With many challenging and sometimes frightening events in our world, it is natural for us to have some uneasiness. Is there a snap for uneasy?
Yes, there is. Name it. So first you're doing soothing touch, right? Because you don't feel calm or you don't feel easeful. And then you're naming it. I feel dis-ease. And then you're saying, what do I need to hear right now? And it'll depend why you are feeling uneasy. Are you feeling uneasy because you're about to give a presentation? That then you'll say something to yourself more tailored to that. Or are you feeling uneasy because you're about to take your animal whom you adore to the veterinarian to be euthanized? Then that's a different conversation that you're going to have for yourself. And I talk about that in the book. Actually, in the first book, and I think in the second book, I have pet stories. And really that dis-ease is really anticipatory grief.
And of course, there are so many challenging and frightening events in our world. How may we remain mindful during personal, local, and global disasters?
We need to calm down to step up and help. And I think that it's our privilege and our honor and our duty to be the change that we want to see. And you can't be a nervous hilaria or a train wreck and be effective. And being effective feels good. So the first thing that you have to do is manage your own nervous system so that you can be that person that is of service, that furthers your core value of service, that then gives you eudaimonic joy and makes you feel good. And you know, on and on and on and on. It's an upward spiral of goodness.
And you spoke about David Kessler and learning how to deal with people who are grieving. What would you share for those who are grieving loss at this time?
That it's going to change, and that however you're grieving is fine, and that there's really no rules. But that if you're finding that you cannot function, that there is help. There's phenomenal online support groups through Tender Hearts, which he started, and they have it broken down so that if you're mourning the loss of your pet, you're not in the same group as somebody who's mourning the loss of their child. Or if you're mourning the loss of your parent, you're not in the same group as somebody who's mourning the loss of their spouse.
And for those who are trying to comfort someone who is grieving, what would you suggest?
Well, I know what not to say for sure. I remember when my girlfriend Lori lost her husband, and she was so bereft, as she should be, as it's normal to be. Somebody close to her told her to pull up her big girl pants and, get back to, basically get back on the horse kind of. I said, you need to edit that person out of your life. I mean, what we need to do when we are supporting somebody who is grieving is to listen with love. And that's it.
Sacred listening without saying a word, being present for them. That's the greatest gift.
Just be there. Just be there.
I personally find that expressing gratitude for the blessings in my life as a wonderful means of finding both peace and joy. Why is gratitude so important? And is there a gratitude practice that you recommend?
Yeah, I actually have two gratitude practices. One is very old school. In a journal, every single night, I answer two questions. What did I enjoy today? What am I grateful for today? For me, I find that writing down the 5 things you're grateful for is annoying, and it feels Pollyanna. And I feel like it doesn't recognize some of the real suffering that people go through day to day. But even in a dumpster fire of a day, if you think about what did I enjoy today, you can usually find something. Even if you are at the hospital in your bedside and you're caregiving and it's a loved one and it's horrifying, there's usually something. It might have been your morning coffee. It might have been a nurse or a social worker that smiled, that made you feel safe or comforted, or it might have been walking outside or whatever. But you're going to answer that question at night. So it opens you up to looking for those moments, right? And it creates an upward spiral. And the gratitude practice, since I know you know because you do it, has been vetted by science up and down and sideways. So when I'm teaching, I use this graphic that's got all these different circles, and each circle talks about all of the wellness benefits of a gratitude practice, and each circle has a slew of scientific studies underneath it. So, I mean, it's super important to do it every day. And then the other gratitude practice that I just started using is an app, which I never thought I would do, but these young guys reached out to me because I wrote a gratitude piece that got picked up that they somehow saw. And they told me about this Gratitude Plus app and asked me what I thought of it. And I downloaded it and they unlocked it for me because it's free, but then you get more goodies if you pay. And I've started using it. And what I like about it is there's a community aspect to it. So I can actually read other people's gratitudes and get like a sympathetic, buoying joy feeling.
And I am grateful for our time today with Julie Potiker. Her book is called Snap, From Chaos to Calm. Julie, please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
I'm hoping people will go to my website, mindfulmethodsforlife.com, and they'll find everything there. They'll find the reading and resource library, the podcast, which is free, and my books.
Julie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wonderful wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel a real kinship with you, Victor.
And I with you. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Herman. Have a wonderful week.